The historic roots of the comprehensive plan can be traced back to the early 20th century, and it has evolved dramatically since. In this chapter, I'll give a whirlwind tour through comprehensive planning history, highlighting key milestones along the way. The history of the comprehensive plan can be traced back to the City Beautiful movement from the late 19th and early 20th century. A couple of key figures were architect Daniel Burnham, who was known for the 1893 Columbian Exposition, as well as a 1909 plan for Chicago. Also, landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., son of the famous Olmsted. Olmsted Jr. actually prepared a number of city plans and served on the Macmillan Commission for the monumental core of Washington, D.C. As you can see in Burnham's illustration for the 1909 Chicago plan, this movement emphasized physical development of the city. Burnham is perhaps best known for his famous quote, shown here in full. And what probably still resonates today about this quote is that a visionary plan can have real-world impacts, something that is true of the best comprehensive plans today. And just conclude with a little-known fact. There was a civic text called the Manual of the Plan of Chicago that was required study for Chicago public school 8th graders from about 1911 through at least the 1920s. The next major milestone in the history of the comprehensive plan was the Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty Supreme Court decision of 1926, which established zoning and the separation of uses as constitutional, a legacy that cities continue to deal with today, both in terms of positive and negative impacts. The U.S. Department of Commerce published the Standard State Zoning Enabling Act and the Standard State Planning Enabling Act in the 1920s, shortly following Euclid versus Ambler. And the Zoning Enabling Act directed the City Planning Commission to make and adopt a master plan for the physical development of the municipality, address the purpose, contents, and legal status of the plan, and is really the legal foundation of the comprehensive plans that we have today. All 50 states adopted versions of the Zoning Enabling Act. Many adopted versions of the City Planning Enabling Act, and these are reflected in state legislative requirements and guidance for comprehensive plans today. Continuing our tour, let's fast forward through the Great Depression and World War II to the post-war housing boom. And Section 701 of the Housing Act of 1954 is what I call the first Planners Employment Act, because it provided over $1 billion of federal funding from 1955 to 1981 for local jurisdictions to prepare comprehensive plans. So it's unclear how much lasting impact individual plans may have had, but it certainly helped establish planning in general and comprehensive planning in particular as core activities of local governments. T.J. Kent's The Urban General Plan, published in 1964, summarized the state-of-the-art of comprehensive planning in the post-World War II period. Kent called for the plan to be long-range, comprehensive in general in nature, focus on physical development, provide a policy guide for decision-making rather than a detailed implementation program, and also that it be developed through a top-down process with the City Council as a client, and there was limited public participation called for. I'm going to fast forward again through the next couple of decades to the emergence of vision and values-driven planning in the 1990s. This approach was developed largely as a reaction to the top-down rational planning process, the idea of the planner as an expert, and advocacy planning as promoted by Paul Davidoff was an important influence. So as an example of this, I'll point to the Focus Kansas City Comprehensive Plan, which won APA's Outstanding Planning Award for a plan in 1999 as a good example of this new approach. Focus Kansas City was prepared through a values-driven process with robust community participation, and there's a flow diagram that you can see here of how that process worked. And without getting into detail, just note several things about the process. First, there were 3 phases that asked and answered 3 basic questions. I'll get into those later. There were many different ways of engaging communities and stakeholders in the process. And finally, this plan was structured around themes rather than the traditional siloed elements of other comprehensive plans. I'd like to close this chapter with a figure developed by my colleague Rocky Apiro, which depicts in broad strokes how planning priorities have evolved since the late 19th century. I'm not going to get into the details, but a key takeaway is that comprehensive planning, I think, has been a follower rather than a leader of changes in society and the planning profession. And there's typically a lag between when these priorities emerge and when they are adopted in practice. So an example is public participation, which, as I said, emerged from advocacy planning in the 1960s, at a time when comprehensive planning was firmly entrenched in the top-down rational planning model. And I would argue that this pattern must change if the comprehensive plan is to realize its potential of helping communities address the issues of our time. That concludes Chapter 2. In our next chapter, we'll bring our tour up to the present day by first looking at APA's Comprehensive Plan Standards for Sustaining Places, and then by reviewing key themes in contemporary planning practice.